All right, board members, thank you for your patience. We are now live on Facebook.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening. We are commencing the January 13th meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. My name is Stephen Kleist. I am the Vice Chairman of the Alexandria Transit Company. Our Chairman, David Kaplan, will be joining us in progress. So I would like to begin with the agenda item of reading of our notice to conduct the meeting in our electronic format.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, this meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2A3, the Continuity of Government Ordinance adopted by the City Council on June 20th, 2020, or Section 4-0.01G in House Bill 29 and House Bill 30, enacted by the 2020 Virginia General Assembly, Virginia Acts of Assembly, Chapter 1283 and 1289, to undertake essential business. All the members of the board and staff are participating from remote locations through a Zoom meeting. This meeting is being held electronically unless a determination is made that it is safe enough to be held in person at the Alexandria Transit Company Boardroom, 3000 Business Center Drive, Alexandria, Virginia. Electronic access will be provided in either event. The meeting can be accessed by the public via Zoom and Facebook. Public comments may be made if participating via Zoom. The Zoom registration link is available on the Dash website, and requests for public comment can be made using the Q&A or chat feature. This meeting is being recorded.
I'd like to open the meeting with the public comment portion. So if we have anyone that wishes to make a public comment through the stated methods that we have established, I'd like to proceed with that at this point. Anyone interested in making such comment is reminded that we limit that comment to 3 minutes in accordance with the City of Alexandria's procedures on public comment. Caitlin, do we have anyone that's in the queue for a comment?
We do not have anyone in queue for the comment at this time.
Okay. And I believe Chairman Kaplan is now available. David, are you able to access?
Are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Steve, for opening the meeting.
No problem. We arranged for the orderly transfer of authority here, and I pass it over to you, Chairman Kaplan.
Thank you all. I'm on my cell phone at the moment, and do appear to be in the Zoom, but the images on the screen is very slow, is very small. But I'm going to keep trying to get my laptop to cooperate. So if I drop out again, appreciate you, Steve, taking over. The first order of business is the review and consideration of the December 9th meeting minutes, which were included in our board packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt them.
I move to adopt the minutes from our December 9, 2020 meeting.
Moved by Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
And unfortunately on my cell says I can't see the gallery, so I don't know who that was.
I think I said it at the same time as someone else. I'm not sure who. This is Linda.
Okay, well, we'll give it to you, Linda. Seconded by Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the chairman's report, and I have one item to report on, and then actually something in Josh's report that the stockholders meeting, which we'll go ahead and discuss now. But first item is some good news to report a new board member who has joined us, Brandy Collins. And is Brandy on the call with us?
I am.
Hi, Brandy. We welcome you to the dashboard. Brandy's replacing Lisa Henty, who is one of the city manager's 3 appointees, and will then be formally ratified by council. Well, we have a letter from Mark Jinks signifying that he has appointed her, and then she will go up as, Brandy will go up as part of the slate next month when we have the stockholders meeting. Brandy, I know you're a housing program manager in the Office of Housing and started your career with planning and zoning here in the city, but would invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the warm welcome. I first just want to say that I'm very appreciative of the city manager for appointing me to this seat, and I look forward to working with all of you. As you mentioned, I started my career in the Department of Planning and Zoning, and worked a lot with T&ES on different projects, and I look forward to bringing there my expertise and experience with land use and transit and affordable housing to discussions that we have related to transit and in public transportation in Alexandria.
Well, that's great, and I think you know, having somebody from the Office of Housing we have not had a staff representative from that office before, and I think that's going to be very helpful for us, particularly as we look to implement the ATV and make sure that, you know, we're serving the areas where people are living and where they're in need of transit. So we're really happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
The second item is about the stockholders meeting, and Josh had some remarks in his report, and we'll just go ahead and discuss it now because this will be new to some of you who have not been through this. We are members of the board of directors, and the council members, the mayor and council members are the stockholders of the corporation. And so just as with, you know, publicly traded companies, every year they have a meeting of their stockholders to appoint board members and to conduct other business necessary for the corporation. We do as well, and our bylaws state that meeting is held in February, and so the city has scheduled it for the first council meeting in February, which I believe is February 9th, and it's going to be held virtually over Zoom just before the council meeting begins. I think we're allocated 15 minutes. Some years we get an hour, and it's really more of a work session with Dash, and last year, for example, those of you who were there, we had a very extensive report on Dash's performance during the Metro, providing the Blue Line shuttles during the shutdown, and also dealing with the implementation of the ATV. This year, we're going to have a much shorter stockholders meeting, which will really be confined just to doing the business of the corporation with a very, very brief update in terms of how we're doing amidst COVID. So the 2 items that council will have to adopt will be reappointing all of us to new 1-year terms, and appointing the external auditor for the corporation. Basically, we are using the same auditing firm the city uses, and we're lumped in with the city audit, but council, as the stockholders, must actually approve that external auditor. So we will be preparing a notice to council of the agenda items that will be part of that meeting, and we'll be preparing the slate of board members to go forward. We will assume that all of you want to serve another 1-year term. However, if anyone has decided that they would like to retire from the board, to please let us know by January 25th. And you can do that by sending me an email, and you can copy Josh. And if you intend to stay on the board, no need to send us an email. If we don't hear from you, we're going to assume that you want to be on the board again. We will make sure to share the Zoom link so that all of you can be on the call, and we can say to council that, you know, these members of our board are present, are listening, and also if there are any questions or concerns that come up from council, it's a great way just to understand kind of what they're hearing about Dash and what they would like us to focus on, but certainly very different without you know, us being able to be in the room to interact with them. Josh, anything you'd like to add about the stockholders meeting?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just point out from a logistics standpoint, we're still sorting out the start time as well as how you will connect. But we anticipate that you will connect either a similar way that you do to this meeting, or that you will receive information about how to connect from the city. But Beth will be making sure to monitor that process, and she'll be in touch with each of you to make sure she gets you confirmed and set up to attend.
And so after the stockholders meeting, we have to reorganize the board, and our bylaws require that we appoint a nominating committee to select officers of the board and the corporation. Our bylaws indicate that some of the officers of the corporation are people who are designated based on their official position that they hold at the Alexandria Transit at Dash, or in some cases with the city. And then we'll pick the chair and the vice chair of the board. And so either at the February or March meeting, we will have an agenda item to solicit volunteers from the board to serve on the nominating committee to select who our officers will be for the coming year. And then we'll hold elections after the nominating committee has reported back. In February, just as kind of a means of reorganization, I'd like to do just a brief icebreaker exercise with all of you, since it's been now 10 months, and some of you have never sat around the table with us, and I've only seen through screens. And I was thinking that exercise would probably just consist of us introducing ourselves, but maybe responding to a prompt or two about, that will tell us a little bit about ourselves, some things that we're absolutely willing to share in a public forum and at a meeting, but I think it will just help to replicate some of what we've lost, which is the banter of just, the catching up with one another before or after the meeting, and really just getting to know a little bit more about who we are and the perspectives that we bring. So I'm working on a couple of questions that we can respond to. I'm anticipating February will be a lighter agenda, so that we'll have time to do that, and I think it'll be fun for us to just get to know each other a little better. But we'll send out what those questions are in advance, the prompts, so that you can think about what you want to share in advance of the meeting. That's all I have. We'll go on to our next item, which will be the T&ES Director's Report.
Good evening, Chair Kaplan and board members. Nice to see you all again. My report is pretty short tonight, but let's start with the WMATA budget. There have been some additional changes, so I can give you a little bit more information than we have written here. But Congress did pass another COVID-19 relief bill that included $14 billion to fund mass transportation throughout the nation. With that bill, WMATA and the Piedmont Regional Transit Commission, PRTC and VRE, did get a chunk of that money. 610 million was designated for WMATA, and that's after they allocate a portion to local transit providers. So right now we do believe that they will be giving money to local transit providers, and the numbers we have right now, the total number is about $108 million, which is similar to what Dash received in the initial CARES funding, or that was a similar amount that WMATA received. And we don't know if they're going to portion it out to the jurisdictions in the same way. So if Dash will receive the same amount, or if they are going to have a different formula for designating funds to local transit agencies. But it is good news that funding was there. What that means for WMATA, though, and their board will be, this will be presented to their board, I believe, tomorrow night, that some of that money will be used to fill the $95 million budget gap that they have in this current fiscal year, which means they can reduce layoffs and also reduction in service. And then they'll have funds for FY22 as well. So we talked about at the last meeting, their FY22 budget and service projections were pretty dire, closing a lot of rail stations, cutting bus service way back. So they would be able to implement much more of this, but not all. They still would have a gap of about $119 million in FY22. So what they're proposing is to bring back service levels in FY21. This budget amendment would do that, bring them back across the region. And in Alexandria specifically, there were severe cuts planned. These would come back. And so I think region-wide, bus service would increase from about 75% of pre-pandemic levels to about 80%. And so while almost all routes in Alexandria will be running, many will still have reduced service levels, and some will have modified routes. But under this current proposal, the FY22 budget proposal, this increased service would continue through December 2021. So that's kind of where the $119 million gap comes in. They don't know how they'll continue to fund that service after December in the second half of FY22. And so the current proposal says after that, we would have to close 22 stations, including Eisenhower and Van Dorn, and reduce rail service and eliminate some bus service. But that's after, that's a year from now, and we do have some time to try and figure it out. Hopefully ridership will increase and revenues will increase. But that's the update for now with WMATA and where they are. And I think it's good news for Dash that there is likely funding coming to offset some of the revenue loss and that we're going to experience here in Alexandria.
Hillary, is this part of CERT's, the Coronavirus Economic Relief for Transportation Services Act?
If that is the name of the relief portion that came from Congress, then yes.
Okay, and that was in December, and it's my understanding that half of any allocated money has to go to employee benefits and maintaining employee levels. Is that your understanding as well?
So I know that with, I have not, I don't know all the details of the bill, but one of the biggest cuts that WMATA was going to have was layoffs. So they are using this money to maintain staff. So I would assume that you are correct. I don't know what it means for local jurisdictions, and if WMATA can provide the money to us, and if we're able to use it as we see fit, or if it is specifically for employees in reducing layoffs within the local world as well. Josh might know more about that.
Yeah, and Josh, if you know more, that's great. If not, I'm happy to try to do some digging around for you. Although I'm sure if you're getting any money, they're going to tell you what strings come with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot to navigate, and I think we're still kind of waiting to see how things shake out as far as the apportionments. And Evan's been heavily involved in that, but we'll definitely call upon you to get some more clarity there, especially as it starts to sort out how it's going to flow.
Okay, and Evan did weigh in and said certs and the relief bill are two different things. So,
okay,
thank you, Evan.
Yeah, he's he's the expert here, so he's been living in this stuff the entire year. So
I'm just passing on information. Evan, are there any other questions about this that Evan can probably answer better than me? Okay. The last thing I had was just that last night council did consider and approve the two applications. The city put an application to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation for operating funding, and then we brought the I-395 funding applications that the board approved last month to council, and they approved those as well. So lastly, just one additional item. This is on a personal note. I hope to be at the stockholders meeting in the February meeting, but I'm due to have my second on February 12th. So I might miss those meetings. My intention is to continue to participate on the board even while I am on parental leave, because I think I'm going to need some interaction and things to think about that are challenging and interesting. So I do plan to continue to participate if I can, but I might miss a meeting or two coming up this spring. So just wanted to give you all a heads up on that. And that's it.
Thanks, Hillary. And, we are very excited for you, and you'll have to share us, you're going to join us while you're on maternity leave. You'll have to share some pictures so we can share in your excitement, but that's great news. We'll go on to the general manager's report. Oh, other board member announcements. So we have a section, as many of you know, on our agenda where we encourage those of you who are active in other organizations, serve on other boards and commissions within the city when there are updates relevant to transportation or Dash service that, you know, to share that with the group. And so this is the time we set aside for that. All right, well, hearing none, we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Kleist
So
here.
we'll go to the general manager's report.
Mobility Task Force has been extended an additional year. That decision was made
Oh, hi, Steve.
recently by the City Council. I serve as the chair of that working group regarding development of policy and guidance for the use of mobility devices. Due to COVID, it was in a very reduced mode, but we did recommend, and the city concurred, and extended the date for the working group's activities. So that developed very recently.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I will jump into my report.
Well, thank you, Steve. And I know the Commission on Aging, which I serve on, has been following that and very interested in that work.
All right, I'm not sure if we might have lost David there. All right, well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Josh Baker, General Manager, provide brief synopsis of my report, which is included in the packet. It begins on page 9 of the provided packet. I've been keeping you updated about COVID-19 and our service and our challenges surrounding that. Overall, we've had a pretty successful year, relatively, considering the environment we've been operating in. Unfortunately, we did have an uptick in cases within Dash. And actually, since the printing of the packet, we are now at, since December 29th, we're confirmed 9 cases. We did only have 1 that was identified as a exposure within the workplace. So we're still, relatively compared to the environment we're operating in, we're really continuing to do quite well in my perspective. Although this has been the worst stretch for us as far as cases. So Stephanie Salzone, who is on here as a panelist, joins us this evening. I just want to make sure, and we do have a new board member, so that Brandy knows who Stephanie is. She has really been tracking this, and I just want to share with you all also that we've got a lot of work going on pertaining to the vaccine. And I'm going to talk a little bit in just a moment about some of the things that we've been dealing with related to the vaccine process. But the good news is that Virginia has moved, or at least Alexandria has moved into 1B, and 1B is transit. Transit employees are classified as essential under 1B. So that process has been moving forward, and Stephanie has been monitoring that quite actively. So I'll just pause for a moment to ask Stephanie if there was anything else that was prudent to the business of the board that you wanted to share beyond what has been shared in the packet, as well as the progress on the vaccine, and to pause for a moment for any questions from board members specific to COVID-19 and the vaccine process.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just would like to add 2 pieces of information. One being that typically our positivity rate has been around 37%. And I know that sounds a lot higher than what you're used to seeing, but that's because we typically only hear about tests that are positive, not so much employees that are testing and coming back negative. But with this spike that we saw starting December 29th, our positivity rate went up to about 53%. So that was the significant increase that we saw. We've averaged out overall back to around 40. So we're back around normal now. And additionally, as it relates to the vaccine, I can say as of today that all employees from Dash have been registered through VAMS by myself. And so now we're just working from a support angle with staff, helping them to register and answer their questions and get them the help that they need to get the vaccine if they choose to do so. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have about either of those.
Stephanie, it's David. The question for you and Josh: are you going to go over any further the survey results that that you had from the survey of the workforce about the vaccines, or are there takeaways that you want to share about sort of what your strategy is for way forward, and partners like the health department you might be working with to persuade employees about the educate them about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine?
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on that, and then again, let any questions come forth, and Stephanie speak to this as well. So the vaccine survey that we did in-house was an attempt by my team and I to ascertain the position that most of our workforce was taking on the vaccine process, and the efforts surrounding it. And in your packet, you have a detailed breakdown of those surveys. We got 100 responses, which is pretty good. That's a little less than half the workforce. Quite a few representatives of direct frontline staff. So that was helpful. We had heard, and we're not surprised by the survey results, that more than half of the respondents indicated that they weren't sure or were not going to be getting the vaccine, at least initially. The chart on the screen here is one of those charts that summarizes this question, which was the second question of whether they would be willing to take it if generally available. The other response that dug a little more into this, which is now on the screen, is related to why these people indicated that they would not, or why I'm not sure. And the overwhelming majority are weighting related to side effects and impacts on others, and then concern about medical trials. So to sort of summarize what we've done with this information, there's been a lot of talk about this with my team and I. We're doing a number of things, the biggest of which is ramping up our educational campaign with the workforce to help them understand the details of the vaccine, how it came to be, and what the information is that's coming out of it from medical health professionals. Obviously, we would love to see every single employee take this the first day they possibly can take it. We know that it is potentially life-saving and has a huge impact for us in helping to beat this virus. But this is also not an unusual response compared to much of what we're hearing publicly, which is a similar amount of concern. So this combination of educational outreach, newsletters, postings within the organization is going to be supplemented with individuals who are willing to take the vaccine right away, sharing their story with the workforce. This is a medical matter, so we as an organization can't get into details about people's experience with the vaccine or identify them. We can summarize that, but we know that the biggest effect is going to be your peers, the people you work with. That's proven, and so we're going to work to encourage people to submit to us and Whitney's team, our marketing and communications team, that they've gotten the vaccine and whether they're willing to talk about their experience, whether they're willing to share a picture of themselves getting it, or for that matter, to share any experience they've had related to side effects. We feel like the combination of those things will help to tell the story. But the other piece of this is just making sure that staff who are concerned about this have an opportunity to talk to those individuals. So if I've gotten the vaccine and I'm a bus operator and there's another bus operator who's concerned, we're going to be encouraging, to the extent they're willing, the bus operators to talk to each other in a safe way about their experience. Again, hard to say exactly how much of an effect that will have compared to just time, but that's going to be our approach, among some other things.
Hey, Josh, this is Matt again. I'm doing a lot of outreach, especially in underrepresented communities, and I'm working with Natalie Tellis with the City Department of Health. She'd be happy to do a presentation for you all in the drivers. I would also suggest maybe you and a driver do it together and show that the leadership is behind this, because there's nothing more important than getting everybody vaccinated. Not to mention it saves their lives, but it keeps us viable. And I'm happy to share some PowerPoint presentations offline with you and follow up as well. So
thank you. Yeah, please send that my way, and thank you for that comment. That is also something that our leadership team has agreed to. We want a diverse representation of individuals of all types throughout the organization who are willing to take this to tell their story. And I am one of those individuals who is very willing to do so. I think it's very, very important that our workforce knows that we as a management team are with them. We're not just sitting back and saying, well, you take the risk. No, we're all in this together. So certainly something that is going to be a major part of our process as we continue to move forward. Notably, it's still going a little slow, and that's fine. Alexandria has a lot. They've done really well, and we know that they're going to pick up real quickly, but this is just getting started right now. So, were there other questions or anything that maybe I haven't touched on, Stephanie, that you would like to add to that? Okay, Stephanie.
No, sir.
Any other board member questions? Okay. Well, seeing none, we're just going to move forward here with my other report items. Excuse me while I have to flip back. Just real quick, something exciting, good news. Dash was a recipient of 2 awards from the Virginia Transit Association this year. We received them virtually. One was for our outstanding community program, and that was recognition of our efforts and success with the Blue Line Shuttle last summer. As well as Tristan Cunningham, who is in our planning department. Tristan received the Transit Employee Unsung Hero Award for the Commonwealth. We just want to please join me in thanking Tristan for his hard work and the entire team at Dash for everything that they did as a part of this Blue Line Shuttle, and Tristan's contribution to that, as well as his contribution to Dash. I think he's been working for us since before he was born, quite frankly. It certainly seems like it. Tristan has definitely put a lot of hours into Dash. So then the other item here that I wanted to just touch on is related to city staff. Currently Dash staff ride Dash free of charge by showing their ID. The city we're going to be working with the city to move the city staff into that same kind of arrangement. Right now, there's kind of a strange phenomenon where a few departments of the city will buy a pass from Dash, which is counterintuitive considering the city funds Dash. So they're buying a pass from themselves in many ways for staff to ride. And we want to, Hillary has been working hard on this on the city side. We want to remove the barrier of them using public transit as an employee of the organization that funds Dash, and also reduce the work that's involved with selling passes, printing passes, these kinds of things affiliated with that. It's still a work in progress, and any revenue impacts will be addressed within the course of the city budget process between the Office of Budget and our team and Hillary's team, just to make sure that we dot all the I's and cross all the T's. But I wanted to make you all aware of that, and there's more information as well in the packet.
Josh, I have a question. Is that available for part-time staff, temporary staff as well, or just full-time city staff?
I'm not sure. Hillary, do you want to talk about what you all have envisioned on that?
Yeah, we're still working through it. And this is just a quick update. It's will be part of the budget process. So we don't have all of the details yet. And city staff is working with Dash staff on the best way to administer the program and make it easy. So we'll just have to continue to work on it and figure out who all is eligible. It'll definitely be full-time and likely seasonal and part-time too, just for the administrative hassle that it would cause to prohibit those folks from using Dash.
Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions there. I'll head to the last item here on my report, and that is to keep you all updated as we committed last month regarding where we stand on the installation of our driver barriers. As a reminder, these are barriers that the drivers can close, and they have windows on them that can be closed to help isolate them from passengers who are boarding and alighting through the front door and paying their fares. This number keeps moving. The good news is it's been moving up. So we're now at 84 kits have been delivered from the manufacturer. We have a mixed fleet of buses. So some of the odder buses that need special design are still in process, but our team will start training with the manufacturer to get them installed on January 19th. And then we will be doing the installations in-house. So we'll have control over the pace of that. We're hopeful that it will be a rapid pace and that by the February meeting, I'll be able to come back to you with a final update as well as a formal recommendation for reimplementation of fares. But at this point, we haven't started the install. However, we have received 84 kits.
Josh, you know my discussion and thoughts on the installation of this. Is there, I sort of see the vaccination, the install, and the fares all tied together. I'm thinking that the vaccines are coming out at a pretty good clip right now. Is there any way you'd factor that into maybe reducing the number of the installations and or increasing the fares sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if things really ramp up in the next couple of weeks in advance of the February meeting, and we were in a position that really was solid, certainly I would move the reimplementation of fares up. Now we do have to keep a certain amount of notice so that we can inform the riders, and marketing can make sure that people aren't caught off guard, and you know, there's decals on the buses that have to be removed and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Matt. I think the optimist in me says that assuming that the vaccinations ramp up, and frankly, I have a lot of confidence in our team. We've got a great group of people. I think once they learn how to do these, it's kind of one of those things where once you've done one, you can kind of know where all the screws go, and you know, boom, 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 move through. So hopefully that's going to happen at a fairly quick clip. Again, the challenge will be if the remaining part of the fleet, the odd part of the fleet, continues to be delayed. We have to be conscious of the fact that operations can't function with a fragment of the fleet rendered inoperable or not usable, or at least not that size of a portion of the fleet, especially considering the coordination with maintenance and downtime. So, but yeah, if it moves fast, I'll certainly be happy to come forward with a new recommendation in February.
Josh, can I add something to the discussion, please?
Sure.
I think when we're discussing vaccines and making sure folks are protected, we need to be mindful that the vaccine program calls for 2. And in order for most folks to feel totally comfortable, they would probably want that second shot before they proceed with like business as usual. So just keep that in mind too, as we look at time and when we can roll everything back to where they were before.
For sure. Thank you for that point. That's a good point. And since the appointments will vary as to when they can get their first appointment, it's going to certainly affect the final vaccination. All right. At this point, I'm going to ask my Assistant General Manager, Raymond Wee, to join us. He is on the Zoom. He's going to talk to you very briefly to update you on our electric bus program and the progress surrounding that. So, Ray, I will turn it over to you, and your slide is on the screen.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Per the board's request, I'd like to bring to you a very rather brief and high-level overview and status update of where we are with our current zero emissions bus efforts. We currently have mainly two simultaneous efforts. One is our implementation study. The study had commenced officially on December the 8th. The firm we have selected to lead us in this study is WSP, very well renowned and experienced firm as it comes to transit fleets, services, and zero emissions technology. We had a kickoff meeting on December the 8th. Currently, the project team consists of members of DASH staff, the WSP team, as well as a few members of city staff as well. So we do have expertise in energy management from the city, as well as facility staff who's very familiar with the DASH facility. As of today, the project is concluding task number 2, which is the compilation of known data, where the consultant is assembling all of the known data from DASH, all of our service data, fleet data, capital planning data, all the data that we have had from our feasibility study and report, as well as our facility itself and our current ongoing electric bus projects. The purpose of task 2 is to establish and understand the baseline of assumptions, which will carry as the baseline for the remaining tasks of the study, tasks 3, 4, and 5. Throughout the spring of 2021, going into the summer, the project team is expected to conduct and complete tasks 3, 4, and 5, which looks into facility assessments, short-range infrastructure and equipment needs, as well as an analysis of charger locations and facility layout. Following this, the project team is expected to deliver a final report, or at least a draft of the final report for us and the board to review by the end of May 2021, hopefully before the summer. Of course, this is subject to overall progress of how the project is going. This project is also coordinated with our DASH facility expansion plan design, which is currently undergoing process to go out for solicitation. Any questions on the zero emissions bus implementation study? Next slide, please. Concurrently, we are also wrapping up and concluding our first implementation of zero emissions buses. These buses were funded by the Volkswagen mitigation funds, which were awarded to us about a year or two ago. As a result of this, we were able to introduce our first 6 electric buses to the DASH fleet over the course of the summer, and wrapping up now, we have installed and commissioned 6 depot chargers, 3 of them from ABB and 3 of them from Proterra. These represent one of the most adequately configured chargers and really the best of the best technology, which will help us propel us far forward as we can with our implementation of zero emissions buses. The construction and commissioning has just completed over the winter of just now, with the last charger just now completing the city permitting and inspection process. We currently already have 3 zero emissions buses from New Flyer, which have been introduced and launched in service. They've been running in regular service since the fall. We are currently anticipating the delivery of our first 3 zero emissions buses from our next manufacturer, Proterra, which will be delivered between now and February 2021. Following this, we have 8 more zero emissions buses on order, funded by the MVTA funded by MBTA funds, and those will be expected to arrive throughout this coming summer. Any questions?
Hi, Raymond, I have a question.
Yes.
Being new to the board, is the goal to replace all of the existing fleet with zero emission buses? And my second question is, what is being done with the current buses? How are they with it? What is going on with the buses that we currently have? Are they being donated, or I don't know?
Yes, excellent question. So the board has established as a policy decision to have DASH transition to a fully zero emissions fleet. So the transition goal is to purchase nothing but zero emissions buses by the year 2027. So it's a gradual transition. It can't. It's a heavy lift to do overnight, and it's frankly not possible to do overnight. But we're doing the best we can to expedite it as reasonably expeditiously as possible. So we believe that we can get to that point by 2027 to buy nothing but zero emissions buses by then. And then at that point, the last remaining non-zero emissions buses should be purchased from the fleet around the year 2035. And by the year 2035, our fleet should be 100% zero emissions buses. As far as what happens to the buses that they replace, yes, it is intended that these zero emissions buses do replace the other older conventional buses of the fleet, including old diesel, clean diesel, as well as our diesel electric hybrid buses. The buses that are funded to us by the Volkswagen mitigation program actually come with a stipulation that the buses that they replace must be dismantled and destroyed so that they cannot run again. So what we do with them, we send them to a scrapyard, and we actually have to document them being dismantled and destroyed. They pull the engine out, they cut the engine in half, and we have to document it. We have to fully document and ensure that they're done for good. And aside from that, we typically we dispose of most of our buses through auction. The vast majority of them do end up going to scrap. Very rarely a second user might pick up one of these buses for some type of second life, but I can't say that the vast majority of them do end up going to scrap purposes. Any other questions for me? Great, thank you.
Oh, Jim?
Raymond, sorry.
Yes.
Just a quick question. I did notice here some of the early data reports you guys had on performance and electricity use. Just can you say like how are the buses performing relative to what you had anticipated? And does it? Yeah. Well, let me start with that question.
Yeah. So it's very. We were very cautious about having any hard expectations to begin with. Mainly because the data is not vast. It's few and far between, and a lot of the data comes from manufacturers, which may be overly optimistic. So we went into this knowing, or having an asterisk on the data that we did know, which is it's not a large set, and we have we can't say we have a very high confidence level in that data. With that said, the data that we did have, indicated that the buses could do maybe somewhere in the 2.5 kilowatt hour per mile range in ideal conditions. And which is we actually did see that. We did see buses do anywhere between 2.0, 2.5 kilowatt hour per mile in ideal conditions. That is before the weather got cold. As soon as the weather that got cold, that figure increased to what we see now, 3.0 to 3.5, which is expected. We do not have the auxiliary diesel heaters on these buses. We wanted to keep them truly electric. So a lot of the energy consumption will go towards heat generation.
Jim,
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jim, I'm holding out for some advancements in the coming year, hopefully from manufacturers on heating. I know the electric car manufacturers have started to move forward with heat pumps, which have significantly increased or decreased the heat consumption. But to my knowledge at this point, the transit manufacturers are still not there yet as far as the large size. And a lot of the heating and HVAC is done not by the manufacturers of the buses, but by the HVAC manufacturers. So it's going to be a matter of getting them to get that stuff developed.
No, heat pumps are the way to go for sure.
Yeah, and we're also actively exploring alternate ways for us to conserve as much energy as possible, especially when needing to meet heat requirements. So ambient cabin conditioning while the buses are plugged in at the garage is something that we're looking into. Little things like that go, little bits of it will help us go a long ways.
Any issues with the charging infrastructure so far? Everything working smoothly? Any learnings there?
We don't have too terribly much of feedback or advanced feedback as far as the charging infrastructure. They work. We're using at least 60 to 70% of our charging infrastructure works more or less fine on a regular basis. There's at least one charger that's going through some final teething issues, which we should expect to be completed by the next week or two. But they work. We don't have we're the next step of this experience is to dive into the deeper details of how the buses are charging. Are they charging efficiently? Are we getting the max SOC out of them? How are they ending their sessions? Or are we getting errors? Are they charging better or worse in different conditions? And so those are the questions we hope to gain information or experience into next.
Great. Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you.
Good to see all the progress.
All right. Thank you, Ray. Looking around my screen, I don't see any additional questions. So I will ask our chairman. Well, I guess Mr. Chairman, if you have don't have any objections, we'll ask Evan Davis to proceed into the financial reports.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Evan Davis, Director of Finance. My report's on pages 20 to 24 of your packet. I'll just highlight the key things and then pause for any questions that you may have. We remain on track through a third of fiscal 21. We are working very closely with the Finance Department and the Office of Management Budget at the city to facilitate the transfer of the CARES Act relief funds that are covering our revenue losses, as well as the additional special expenditures that we have in response to COVID-19. The transfer for the first third of the fiscal year was made in December, as was the transfer for all the added expenditures. So we're very thankful for that. And you will see that on the December financial reports that will be before you at the February meeting next month. And that'll cover a lot of the large running deficit that we have, as well as the grant transfers that we hope to happen for all of the expenses that are being funded for the AT1 Plus and the AT9 by the I-395 Commuter Choice Program. And again, there's just some appropriation issues that happen in the background that we need to get done, and then we can move things to the right place and the numbers will look a lot better on the reports. With all that being said, we are showing a $2.2 million deficit on paper year to date, but again, we are actually under budget on the expenditure side, taking into account everything I just said about the money that needs to be moved into the right buckets in fiscal 21. So that's kind of the big picture of where we are. As we've discussed, the general manager is recommending a return to fair collection in March. We had initially assuming 6 months of fair collection in this fiscal year. We were projecting around $678,000 in fair revenue at about 40% ridership. Compared to pre-COVID levels that we would collect in the last 6 months of fiscal 21. Because we're now looking at 3.5 months, we've reduced that projection to about 454,000 that we anticipate to collect from about mid-March through the end of the year. Of course, that will be impacted by the exact date that we actually reinstitute fares, which, per the discussion this evening, is still something that the board will take up and decide at the right time. We do feel pretty confident that our ridership will stay at least around the 40% of pre-COVID levels mark. That we're already above that in a lot of weeks right now. And as more and more of the community is vaccinated, we anticipate that ridership will slowly increase, as we head through the end of this fiscal year. I did in the report show you what we believe is a potential but unlikely scenario that in the case that revenue or ridership rather might drop to around 30% after the reintroduction of fares. It's hard to say in this environment exactly how responsive riders will be to the reintroduction of fares, but we do believe for a lot of reasons that 40% is probably a good estimate. If we're wrong and less people are riding, what that simply means is that we would use more of the CARES Act relief funds in fiscal 21 rather than saving them for fiscal 22. But thankfully, we do have the resources from the CARES Act to get us through fiscal 21 and into fiscal 22, which we're very thankful for. And what that really leads us into is, again, the new relief bill. If you could please go to the next slide, Josh, which was called the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. As you all know, it had a whole lot of things in it. One of the things in there was $14 billion for transit. About $700 million is going to WMATA. They have indicated their willingness to share about $100 million of that with the local providers, which takes them down to about the $610 million number that Hillary was discussing earlier that WMATA is going to keep for their own operations. We are waiting for the exact allocation and how that's going to happen. It does look like we could probably anticipate something similar to what we got from the CARES Act, which was $6 million. However, the city, as a whole has to decide how it's going to use those resources. And we don't quite know what that is yet. The city may need to use some of that to offset their contribution to WMATA. And so all of those discussions are very live right now. And a lot of those pieces will fall into place by about a month from now when the city manager proposes his fiscal 22 budget. So that's where we are. And I'm really happy to answer any questions you may have.
Not seeing any questions pop up. All right, thank you, Evan. Next on the agenda, just watching to make sure no one has any comments, will be Martin Barnard, Director of Planning and Scheduling.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have two planning items on tonight's agenda, both of which are requested for board action. Next slide, please. The first of the two items is the DASH Service Planning Decision-Making Framework. You'll recall that this is an effort to increase the transparency with which we make our service planning decisions, which could be of particular importance over the coming months as we grapple with our FY22 budget and TDP Transit Development Plan. So we had shared a draft version of this framework with the board last month, and the final version, which is virtually identical to what we shared last month, is included in your packet on page 25. It basically summarizes the key factors and the ranking, the prioritization of those factors. Next slide. You can see those here. And then next slide, the last slide here is a table that I prepared that kind of shows, it shows 3 fictitious service change proposals. These are not real proposals, but I provided this table to give you an idea of what it would look like in practice if we implement this framework, how it would be used to evaluate different service changes and kind of prioritize them. So again, happy to answer any questions. The information is mostly provided in the packet though.
Hey,
Martin,
Larry here. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead.
Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Hey, Larry. Hey, Martin. Thanks for sharing this. I think that this framework is solid. I do just have one question around it, or maybe more just a statement, honestly. As I look at this, I think about, what drew me to transit in the first place. Being middle class Alexandrian in Central Alexandria. There were a lot of values tied up in that, and I look at a lot of my neighbors. They're not necessarily sharing the same values. They're not taking the bus. They're driving. They're using vehicles, multiple vehicles per household, and it really it's kind of it's a choice. It could be a kind of a hard choice to decide. Well, we're going to be a one-car family or a no-car family, and really make use of the transit system. And I wonder. I mean, we talk a lot, and the bus needs to serve people who rely on the bus and who need it. But I also wonder if something in our framework shouldn't also be aspirational in terms of changing how all Alexandrians view the bus system. So not just serving certain demographics, but really encouraging a broad demographic of the broadest possible number of Alexandrians to ride the bus. So it's not anything specific to this, but it's more just a philosophical thought as we look at this, as we look at what Dash is going to be over the next decade versus just ridership now.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item or comments?
I think David was getting ready to say something.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think I have there's probably a delay, and so sometimes end up talking over you. So I apologize for that. Well, first, Larry, I want to say I agree with your comments completely. I live in Old Town, an area that has tons of bus service coming through it, and have been really trying to ensure my neighbors see that as a convenient option to connect them as they go around town, and to understand some of the really negative stereotypes that have persisted from prior years when transit really was a service that was only for people who had no other option. And so I think it's so important that we emphasize the convenience, and in many cases the frequency of the new network that we're going to be offering, and figure out and hopefully through some of the rebranding that staff is doing with the ATV that will help us to get there, because we'll be kind of getting away from some of the older conventions of how we acknowledged routes. And so, things that people may remember from a bad experience they had on a particular route 20 years ago, it's all brand new, and it's all worth trying. I did, as Martin had said at the beginning, that this is an action item. We want the board to adopt and to kind of get behind this framework, or what the framework should be, because we know we're in an environment where staff is going to have to come forward with proposals for how we're going to use very limited resources. And when we do have to look at those reductions to understand, they want to understand from us what are the framework, what are the things that make sense, because it also will help us to be able to explain to the community why we're coming forward with reductions, how they were determined, so that people don't feel like we were simply just looking at what was convenient or expedient, that we have a methodology for how these things work. And so if there are changes to what that framework is, to bring that forward, I think this is very, very thoughtful, and I think it really gets at the heart of what we do and how we evaluate the service in terms of what we need to protect, and where we would look to begin to make adjustments if we find ourselves in that situation. So the hope tonight is that the outcome will be that we have a motion and some concurrence from the board to help guide this in the future. And this is not to say that we cannot go back and revisit this framework. We probably will talk about it on an annual basis before we embark on future exercises. So it's not that this would be set in stone forever, but we do need to have something on the record that says this is how we're going to go about doing that. So what are, well, and one final thought is that Kaplan Town Center, that's, I don't know if that's my place on Queen Street, but that's great. And I'm glad that we should definitely be adding service there. But, that made me chuckle.
I figured if anyone would say that, that Easter egg, you would see it. So. Glad you enjoyed it.
But let me ask colleagues to weigh in on this, and so we can get a sense of the board.
I think my impression is that it makes a lot of sense. I agree with the prioritization of ridership as a key metric, along with these other items. And I think it puts a good kind of on different factors into the mix. It looks in abstract quite good to me. So I guess I would at least at first glance, I would say it's looking pretty good to me.
Mr. Chair, this is Steve. I know the input that we collected through the staff's very diligent effort was to reach out to the broadest base of our constituency to see how we can best structure the system. And I know there was work done by other groups, specifically when I was on the Transportation Commission. I see that was included here. The criteria to address the most broad-based groups that we could provide transportation services to with regard to DASH. So given that it's a consensus-based document and has evolved with a lot of good community input, while we will never be able to provide all needs, I think it certainly is one that allows us to maximize the ability for DASH to provide service throughout the city based on the constraints that we have, both from an infrastructure standpoint as well as a fiscal standpoint. So again, I want to thank staff for their work to develop this and suggest that we move it forward.
Thank you, Steve.
I would just weigh in, I like what Larry said, and I totally hear that. I think, the goal is always to get more people out of cars, on transit, and using our facilities. But, as we know, people are busy and time is really valuable. And until we have a system that makes it either faster or more convenient or cheaper, hits on those points that people care about, they're not necessarily going to switch their modes. And that's going to take a long time. And I think, with the ATV and the 2030 network and some of the work that the city is doing, we're working to get there. But right now, in this current time, in this current crisis, I do think focusing on the ridership and the equity and making sure that we're providing transit for people that don't have another choice right now is kind of the crucial elements that we need to be considering for this particular budget. So I agree with the criteria and the way it's listed and ranked, and I definitely think we need to think about all those other factors as well in the future. But right now, if we are addressing cuts, I think we should be looking at ridership and equity as the top two priorities. So.
Thanks, Hillary.
Just a
question. Sorry. Do you want to go ahead, Ian?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly weigh in, agree with Hillary. Basically, we have no choice. We do have to focus on those factors. But it will definitely be a good thing to rebrand and reintroduce transit going forward.
Thank you.
And Martin, I just have a question that's in the weeds. And looking at the template, I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. And I see that there are a number of factors that are being considered. How, using all the factors that are considered, how are you all ranking, how are you establishing the priority from 1, 2, and 3 on this particular example?
So, we kind of, we don't have a specific formula. It's not like a numerical quantitative exercise where, ridership is weighted, 5 points, equity is weighted 4 points, that kind of thing. So there is a level of discretion that's involved, but usually the first thing that we do look at is ridership and the number of riders are impacted. We do like to weigh the degree to which they are impacted. So obviously there'd be a different impact in terms of someone who is losing service entirely or someone who is just going to have to wait a few extra minutes because we're reducing the number of buses that we run on that route. So the degree of impact, the ridership loss are kind of some of the big things we look at, and then equity. We do like to look at that. And I actually while we're in the weeds, just a note, I've shown the table here, I've shown percentages. I think going forward, I'm going to show that as actual numbers of low income and minority residents that are served by this route, because you know, the percentages don't, you know, it could vary greatly depending on how many, the number of residents in that area. So just a minor note on that. So those are kind of the first two that we look at. And then, you know, the impact, if there's another route that's available on the same corridor, that would certainly, you know, make it a little less of an impact. So that would, you know, might make us more inclined to make the reduction. And then cost efficiency, if it's a higher amount of savings per rider lost, then certainly there's efficiency there. So we kind of weigh those four, and if it looks okay across the board on those four metrics, then we may consider it for a high priority of reduction.
Hey, Martin, on the Eisenhower busway, is that still on course to be completed whenever they said it was going to be? And is that in any way factored in the routes if there are delays or any significant changes?
Can you, the Eisenhower busway, which project?
The expressway that's going to go from the west end down to Old Town? Weren't they going to put in dedicated bus lanes?
Are you referring to the Duke Street BRT?
Duke Street, I'm sorry, Duke Street BRT, yeah.
Yeah, so Hillary can probably talk more at length with that. That was something that we had, during our ATV planning, we were assuming that would be probably not in place no earlier than 2030. So that's a little further down the road. Hillary, do you want to talk about kind of where we stand on the funding and the applications for that?
Yes, so we've actually received a lot of funding. We have about $87 million now, 12 of which we have ready to go, and we are starting community engagement hopefully this spring to really look at a vision for Duke Street and see, you know, what the community values, and then start revisiting the approved 2012 plan, because a lot of people have different opinions now, and it's been a while, so we want to revisit that with the community and basically start fresh with a new design process. Then we get additional funding. We get $75 million in 24, 25, I think, to finalize or to start construction, start purchasing buses. And the goal would be that the transit, or whatever it ends up looking like, would be operational by about 2027.
Okay, so does the ATV consider the BRT in delays, or is it all sort of baked in already?
Yeah, so we were anticipating that there would be bus rapid transit type treatment on that corridor. So we did try and increase the service levels on that corridor to match up with that. So we're anticipating that there'll be, you know, whether it's dedicated bus lanes or you know, other prioritizations, that will be a very good corridor for transit use. So we've designed the network for 2030 accordingly.
And just one minor point, will the Metro buses be able to use the BRT? And Metro has announced some cutbacks in service, particularly, you know, out in the suburbs. Have we considered picking up some of that ridership in the plan?
So the BRT, I think that would be, we'd have to see how that went in the plan. It would depend on the type of prioritization, that if they have lanes. You know, as you might know, the Metroway has dedicated lanes right now, but Dash does not use those. But you know, presumably if we did have dedicated lanes on Duke Street, I think it'd be pretty safe to say that we would want all the buses to be able to use those.
Okay, and then on Metro's cutbacks routes, are we going to be able to capitalize on that in any way to get those Metro riders off Metro buses and onto ours when their routes are eliminated, or is it too micro managing our routes?
I would say that's a little bit of a fluid situation, just because they're kind of you know, going up and down. You know, the way that our routes are designed right now, they're very complementary of each other. So you know, if on the Duke Street corridor, for example, they have the 29 K&N and we have the AT8, and on weekends they're scheduled so that they both run every basically every 30 or 40 minutes, but they're offset, so they kind of you know, arrive every 20 minutes or so you can take either one. So in corridors like that, you know, if they were to cut back service, we could potentially step up. But for the ones that they're really talking about reducing, if they were to, you know, in late FY22, you know, that would probably require some network restructuring or additional resources which I'm not sure that are going to be available, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it.
Mr. Chair, I'll just help you as far as the process here. Whenever you're finished with discussion, I would just remind board members that your camera has to be on in order for you to be considered present for the debate as well as the action. And Larry had asked if there were any additional thoughts regarding supporting this. Just also a reminder, the chat is considered public domain, and any discussion has to take place on screen audibly. It can't take place in the chat because otherwise it violates freedom of information. So he just asked a question about if there are any thoughts. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that was there.
I did. Yeah, thanks, Josh. I put it out there, and it was a little bit quiet for a second, and I wanted to make sure that as well that it's clear that I'll support this. I'm not going to drag us through like I did a couple of meetings back.
Oh, and we can see David. But sorry, David, I didn't mean to point at you. I know you've been having technical issues, and we know that you're present because you've been actively speaking. It was just making sure we stay in compliance.
We'll try it for the time being and see how it goes. And Larry, I also hope I really took your comments a couple of months ago to heart about the need to talk to constituents and really be engaging with the community as to what's going on and be very transparent with them. So I also hope that this is a way to help in that regard if we have to go down that route to say, this what we look at these criteria and this is what the board has said that they value. That's not to say that we will have a robust public process, and if we have to make decisions, community input is going to be very important for us to understand then what are the alternatives, what have we missed in terms of what happens if service has to be adjusted. But I think Hillary, Josh, and I had gotten together after that meeting to talk about this potentially as a way forward, really to help address that and to make sure that we are very are giving the community all the information that we can about these decisions, so that it's not seen as a political process.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. And yeah, and again, I'll support this. I absolutely support this framework. I like the thinking behind it. My comment at the beginning of this call was more just philosophical, looking out, and I understand Hillary's comments too about we've got to take care of business now. Absolutely has my support, and I'll support a motion to support this.
Thanks. Is there further discussion, or we can, if not, we can go ahead and proceed to a vote. We'll need a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim. I'd like to move for a motion that we adopt the service planning framework as presented by staff.
Second by Jeff Bennett.
Okay, all right, moved by Jim, seconded by Jeff. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll ask all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Is anybody opposed? Is anybody abstaining? Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, item 6B, Josh, if you could skip ahead a few slides. We have another board action requested. We are asking for the board to support these 3 resolutions for our FY22 DRPT state grants. You can see the projects listed here. I'll highlight the first one, which is phase 2 of the implementation plan that Raymond had mentioned during his remarks about our electric bus. implementation study. And the other two are listed there. Additional information is provided on page 27 of our packet. Any questions?
Martin, one question on the grants, the intern grant specifically. I know that's been a great program, and I know we've often used it to get a intern in our marketing group, and we've had some really talented students who have come through that program. By applying for a planning intern in planning, does that mean that we are not that will be the only intern we'll be able to get funded through a grant, or might we be able to go back and actually get a second intern as well for the other for the marketing communication function?
So this grant for $40,000 is for one intern position. In the past, we have had marketing interns. However, we've been able to add some positions to our marketing department over the last couple of years, which have allowed us to do a lot more in terms of marketing. I'd also note that the requirements, kind of the guidelines from DRPT on this program have shifted a little bit as well in the last couple of years. What they're really looking for now is a position where they can kind of focus on one area, but then also gain exposure to other areas like maintenance, like finance, and marketing as well. So it kind of makes sense to have them kind of in the planning department, because we're so involved in so many different departments, and then they can kind of spend a day here and there in dispatch or downstairs with maintenance, but having planning as kind of their central home base. So that's kind of how we've shifted the program, and we've had success with that so far.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the grants? I guess I would ask, for those who are new, may not be familiar with the state bus rodeo. That's a really great event, and I wonder, Josh, if you just want to explain to folks what that is and why us being able to not only participate but to host it is really a credit to Dash and Alexandria.
Yeah, certainly this is a big deal. It's something that's hosted statewide. Different transit systems take it on each year. We were supposed to do it this year, and we canceled it, deferred it because of COVID. And we made that decision fairly early on, and it was a good call. So the state deobligated those funds and has to reobligate them to us. So that's what this application is for. And it is anticipated to take place in the spring of 22. Is that right, Evan?
Yep, that's it.
So it would take place probably around March of 2022. It brings a lot of people to Alexandria. So it's a great, also it's a great economic driver for the city.
And it's really about operators who are actually taking the buses through essentially obstacle courses. So it's really on working on honing some of those skills that they're using out on the roads and in situations that are pretty amazing. And we've had, we hosted a couple of years ago at a board meeting, one of our own operators who had placed first, I believe, in the state rodeo. And that was a really a terrific accomplishment. And speaks well to our record of safety and training that we have within the organization.
Mr. Chair, do you want three separate motions?
We can go ahead and vote on these as a block, unless there's a request to separate any of the resolutions. We'll need a motion.
If not, I'll move, if that's okay.
We can vote on them as a block if.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chair,
you're moving them, Matt?
Yeah, I move that the board adopt the three resolutions in support of Dash FY22 DRPT grant applications. 1, the Dash Zero Emissions Bus Implementation Plan, Phase 2. Number 2, State Bus Rodeo. And number 3, Dash Transit Intern. As a block.
Second?
I second.
All right, moved by Matt.
Sounded like Steve was the second.
Okay, I think we had a couple of seconds. I heard Steve's voice first, so okay, so we've got moved in a second. I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. And so we will announce, we've announced the stockholder meeting already with more details to follow in the coming days. Just remember the January 25th deadline. If you're choosing not to remain on the board, I hope all of you are, and look forward to the day that we can all join together around the table. Our next meeting is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021, 5:30 p.m. to be held virtually on Zoom. Is there any other business to come before the board? Any announcements? Hearing none, I will thank all of you for your understanding and patience with me and my very technological difficulties this evening. I do want to thank our staff is endlessly patient with me through this, and I'm hoping that it will improve next month. But I thank all of you for hanging in there with me. We will go ahead and call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
That was Linda. Second, Matt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care.